record, go ahead and do that, please.
Good
morning. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion regarding equitable services under the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER Fund. Please be mindful in our remote environment to mute your microphones. This session is being recorded and will be archived in the CCIP document library. Feel free to type questions into the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box and will provide answers at the conclusion of the slide. I should mention that we will only be responding to general questions about the process of calculating equitable services and not individual district questions, which could be complex, involve legal issues, and should be sorted out one-on-one in a format where we can be more detailed and thoughtful in our discussion. If you do have district-specific questions after you've calculated the amounts following the rules of Section 1117, please email them to us. That will help shape our future guidance. I am Chantel Carter, non-public ombudsman in the Office of Federal Programs, being by Lisa Huckins and Daphne Reese. Our contact information is included on this slide. As always, you can also reach out to the Office of Federal Programs consultant assigned to your district with questions. On September 9th, the United States Department of Education made it known that the interim final rule that was published on July 1st is no longer in effect. This means that local education agencies receiving CARES Act funds, including ESSER and GEAR funds, must provide equitable services to eligible non-public schools consistent with ESEA 1117. On September 25th, the U.S. Department indicated that they will not be appealing the ruling that vacated the interim final rule. So we do not anticipate any additional changes in the manner that equitable services should be calculated. CCIP Note 447 directed districts to consider the timestamp on expenditures. The timestamp will help us provide guidance to districts on how best to move forward with equitable services under the rules of Section 1117. CCIP Note 448 was released on Friday, September 25th. It includes a new calculation tool following the rules of Section 1117, as well as some risk-based scenarios and recommendations. It's important to emphasize that the scenarios and recommendations included in that note do not represent a legal interpretation by the Ohio Department of Education and may be inconsistent with U.S. Department of Education federal audit determinations in the future. It is simply the department's best thinking during these unique circumstances, as we understand there are many questions on how to meet the LEA responsibility to provide non-public equitable services. As such, the department strongly encourages LEAs to consult with their internal legal counsels to determine what is the best approach to take for individual district circumstances. In today's training, we will not be providing guidance to district spending specific scenarios. So there are a few action steps that districts should be engaging in this time period. Step 1 is spending to the amounts calculated with the interim final rule should have ceased with CCIP Note 447. That means there should be no spending for ineligible schools beyond that point. The Ohio Department of Education does not know what ultimately will be required, if anything, of LEAs and non-public schools who received allowable services during the interim final rule but are not eligible under Section 1117. For non-eligible schools under Section 1117, the department recommended the LEAs immediately halt payment for services that have not yet been rendered, including reviewing the terms of contracts for future services. However, for services that have already been rendered, the department recommends a pause on the LEAs on any attempt to reclaim funds, such as by withholding auxiliary services until the U.S. Department of Education provides direction. Here in a bit, Daphne is going to walk us through a demo of how to use the new tool to calculate equitable services following the rules of Section 1117. It's important to realize that the hard work you engaged in earlier this summer with collecting and verifying low-income counts that were not reported in the non-public data system will pay off for you now, as you have already taken this step in consultation. Any data that was collected and verified outside of the non-public data system will need to be included in your new calculation. Remember, following the rules of Section 1117 requires districts to provide services to eligible non-public schools both in and outside of the district. Also, a non-public school does not have to participate in Title I to participate in ESSER. Once you have calculated the new service amounts, you should continue to engage in meaningful consultation with your non-public schools. So I'm going to turn it over to Daphne, who is going to walk us through how to use that new tool.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here and give you a quick demo of the Equitable Services Calculation Table. This table was linked in CCIP Note 448, and also in that same CCIP note are very thorough instructions should you have any questions or unique circumstances. This is a great place to start, and then also, as Chantel mentioned, you want to reach out to your consultant so we can assist you. So I'm going to begin here on tab number 1, the calculation table. And the first step you're going to do is in this pink box, you will enter the district IRN. This table may look familiar for those of you who were using it in its previous versions, because we kept the format fairly similar. What is different from this table from previous versions is that you will be entering the low-income student counts, both for the district and for the non-publics. And then on the second tab, which I will demonstrate after this first tab, you'll be putting the actual non-public data in that tab as well. So first we'll start here with the blue. Next we'll start with this blue box where you're going to enter in the total district low-income student count for served buildings, because this is what Section 1117 requires. So here for this district, we're going to enter in their count of 39. And in this green box, we're then going to enter in the total low-income student count of served buildings for those in the non-public schools. You'll see that the table is automatically going to calculate the proportion of those non-public school students compared to the district total, and then it will create your total non-public equitable service allocation. So if this district had any non-publics who are reporting low-income students but choose not to participate, that count would be entered here in the yellow box. This will then impact the PPA for the other non-publics. Most of you will likely have a 0 here, but please be mindful that if you do have any non-participating non-public schools who do have counts, you'll want to make sure you have that total entered in the yellow box. Once this tab is completely filled out, you'll then be able to start working on tab number 2. So tab number 2 is where we actually list each non-public school and their counts. So St. Michael is already here with its IRN name, public district IRN, and then they're choosing to participate in the ESSER funds. So you'll see there's a drop down here. Their count is 10. So when we enter in the count here, because we have already filled out the first tab, it will then automatically pull up an equitable service amount specific to St. Michael. Let's demonstrate doing this with an additional non-public school. So I'm going to enter in a pretend IRN, but obviously you'll be using actual IRNs for your buildings. For some reason, it is crucial that you make sure to enter in the public district IRN. Even though this is your sheet, you do need this here in order for the two tabs to work together. It is also crucial you make sure to switch this to participate in ESSER. If you do have a non-public that is providing counts, low-income counts, but not participating, you have that option as well. So then over here, I'll enter in the total count for my new non-public, and then it'll pull up the equitable service amount. Let's say I had a conversation with a principal at this non-public, and they realized that instead of 1, they had 2, then I would simply update the count. So this is what you're going to do for each of your non-public buildings. If there are any questions, please make sure you put those in the chat, and we will try to address any general ones at the end of this presentation.
Thanks, you, Daphne.
Chantel, do you want me to go ahead and start out with the questions?
Sure.
Okay, we had some really great questions submitted in advance, and we're going to go through those first, and then we'll work through any questions that you want to add in the chat. I'm guessing some of these are going to be the same questions that other folks have. The first question is, when equitable service money is coming into a district for the non-public school from several other public districts for out-of-district students, is the money tracked like Title 1A, or is it pooled, formal or informal pooling?
This question is worded a little interesting. Equitable service money will not be coming into a district for a non-public school. Each district that generates an allocation under ESSER is responsible for providing those services. If the services are for things like PPE, cleaning supplies, technology, the district that generated the services should be purchasing the items for the non-public school, even though the non-public school is located in a different district. The only time you may want to look at a pooling situation is if the district where the non-public school is located is hiring staff. I'm thinking that will not be the common situation.
All right, next question. Can you please give examples of a district in which buildings are school-wide Title I and some buildings use the free and reduced lunch percentage while others use the CEP method and only elementary buildings are served?
Perfect. So this is a good question because how you determine the public district low income count is very important. And the instructions that came along with this tool were very detailed, and there are very detailed steps in coming up with that count. We're not going to have Daphne model what this would look like, but if you are a district that is in this situation and you need assistance, reach out for us and we will walk you through those steps to come up with the public district low income count.
Do we have to contact out-of-district buildings again for participation, or can we use the responses from the initial contacts or meetings that we had back in the spring?
Because we know that consultation should be ongoing, districts should be reaching out to non-public schools and letting them know that the interim final rule was struck down and that ESSER equitable services will now be calculated following the rules of Section 1117. It is possible that non-public schools who thought they were getting ESSER services based on total enrollment from their home district may have told other districts they did not want to participate in ESSER with them. Since they may not be receiving the same level of services under the rules of Section 1117, if they have eligible low-income counts reported to Title I served attendance areas, they may now wish to participate.
All right, consultation always key. What if the building no longer has any resident district students, the non-public building?
Again, this is definitely something that you should be discussing during your timely, meaningful, and ongoing consultation. There's a couple of key pieces. The child was reported last spring, so the assumption would be that the child was enrolled through the end of the we know that ESSER reimbursements can be made back to March 13th. So if I'm the public district, my consultation is going to kind of include those two things and see if the non-public school had COVID-related expenses that would be allowable under ESSER during the time period when that child was enrolled. So we can't give a direct answer because we don't know the entirety of the situation. But the bottom line is always decisions should be made in consultation with your non-public schools.
Okay, the next district says that under the interim final rule, we budgeted monies for the only non-public school in our district, and that money was already expended. Now with the ruling that equitable services need to be provided eligible non-public schools consistent with ESEA 1117, is it final that we need to recover the money spent by the non-public that is no longer allowable?
CCIP Note 448 addressed this in one of the scenarios. For services that have already been rendered, the department recommends a pause to the LEAs on any attempt to reclaim funds, including withholding auxiliary services, until the U.S. Department of Education provides direction. If your district finds yourself in this situation, please reach out to us via email.
Okay, are MOUs between public districts required for ESSER equitable services money that goes to out-of-district non-publics?
So this question is very similar to the first question. I kept it in our list of questions because I think it's good to hear it again. So we don't imagine or see the need for the use of MOUs for ESSER services. In most cases, we're talking about small service amounts, may be used for things like PPE, sanitation, cleaning supplies, technology. All of those things can be purchased by the district that generated the equitable service amount. We want to keep this as simple as possible. If in consultation with the non-public school, the non-public school wants additional cleaning from a third-party cleaning company, each district would have their own contract with the cleaning company for services at the non-public school, regardless of which district the non-public school is located. The only time where we would really need to look at MOUs is when we're utilizing district hired staff. I think this will be an infrequent use of ESSER funds. If your district has questions specific to memorandums of understandings, please reach out via email.
Okay, what is the criteria for calculating a private school allotment? Is it free and reduced lunch participants, or those who qualify for Ed Choice, or both, or something else?
This has been a hot question for the past week, I would say. The poverty counts that are used for the calculation of ESSER equitable services are from October 2019 count week. These counts were reported in the non-public data system, or NPDS, in the spring. Districts should have collected any counts that were not reported in NPDS earlier this summer. If the non-public school does not participate in the National School Lunch Program, they should use the Ohio Household Income Verification Form to identify poverty counts. If they use the national or participate in the National School Lunch Program, that's obviously the preferred method because it's the same as public districts are using. The Ohio Household Income Verification Form is located in NPDS and has the same income guidelines as the National School Lunch Program. Now, Ed Choice Scholarship does have a poverty component to it, but the income guidelines are not necessarily in alignment with the National School Lunch Program. There are cases that the income guidelines are up to 400% of the poverty level, and a child within that income bracket would not qualify for the National School Lunch Program and therefore not generate an amount under ESSER. For districts, they should be working with their non-public schools to identify a process to identify and verify low income counts. This usually happens in the period from February to May. So the only counts that are being verified now are those, again, that were reported outside of NPDS that happened over the summer and through this ongoing consultation that districts are engaging in with their non-public school. This is not what most of the state should be doing right now because it's already been done.
Okay, next question. Since we were told by ODE consultants to use the higher amount of the first formula back in June, our non-pubs made purchases or have outstanding purchase orders exceeding the new formula. How do we now account for the over expenditure of the non-public schools?
Perfect. So one thing I'll say about the wording of the question, our non-pubs made purchases. I think that's probably just a quick way of saying the district provided services to the non-public school. But we do want to keep in mind that non-public schools should not be making their own purchases. Districts need to maintain control of the funds and provide those services to the school. Outside of that, to answer the question, we are awaiting additional guidance from the U.S. Department of Education regarding this situation. If your district finds yourself in this situation or a similar situation, please reach out to us via email with the details of the situation.
Okay, and the last pre-submitted question. I have 0 non-public schools participating in Title I this year. How does that impact what my district needs to set aside for ESSER funds?
Participation in Title I is not a requirement for participation in ESSER. In order for non-public schools to be eligible to participate in ESSER, they must have low-income counts from October 2019 that are reported to Title I public district attendance areas. You can find a report with this information in the CCIP on the non-public school service page under Title I. The instructions that came with the new tool also includes this in the steps. This is the source data for the file that Daphne walked you through.
Okay, we're going to move to a couple questions that have been submitted in the chat now. The first is, how does an LEA reimburse an out-of-district non-public with a COVID expense from March 2020? Pay the vendor or have the vendor reimburse the non-public?
So in our earlier calls, we did suggest that the district could reimburse the vendor and then the vendor reimburse the non-public school. Sometime near the end of July, there was a frequently asked question document from the U.S. Department that we posted in the document library. And that is a question submitted on that frequently asked questions. And direct reimbursement to non-public schools is allowable in this very narrow situation between March 13th and when the district started to engage in regular ongoing consultation. So I would encourage whoever asked this question to go into the CCIP document library, take a look at the frequently asked question, and then move forward with that.
Okay, from Lucas, for non-public buildings not located within the public district boundaries, is the public district to make the purchases on behalf of the non-public and just have them delivered to that non-public building? No services, just supplies, equipment.
Right. So in that situation, you want to follow the process that you have in place for your normal orders. Some districts have materials shipped to a central processing place. If it's something like technology, Chromebooks, those items would need to be tagged and inventoried as property of the district that purchased them. If it's consumable supplies like PPE or sanitation supplies, those can be directly sent to the non-public school. Or again, if your process is that you have a central location, you account for them and then deliver them to the non-public school, either one of those is fine.
Okay, next question from Diane Thompson. Hi, Diane. So if the non-public did not participate in NPDS, ooh, it's scrolling up on me, and did not generate a low-income report from October 2019, is this non-pub considered eligible? So they didn't submit data in NPDS, it sounds like.
Yes. So we can't say that a non-public school is not eligible for ESSER equitable services simply because they didn't report an NPDS. We know that NPDS reporting opened up in February. That was before there was even ESSER funds, right? That was not in the initial guidance that we sent to non-public schools, that if they wanted to participate in ESSER, they are required to report an NPDS. Now, we did extend the date in May with the note that said, you know, you should really consider reporting all of your non-public counts or all of your low-income counts because that may be something that we need. But in subsequent CCIP notes, we have directed public districts to be reaching out to any non-public school with which they have a relationship and making the determination, did they report data? If they didn't, does that mean they don't have any? Or they just didn't want to participate in Title I, so they didn't report it? I think that's a long way of saying if you have non-public schools that are not participating in Title I and you haven't included this as part of your consultation with them, you definitely want to circle back and make sure that you have the low income data. Now, again, Daphne pointed out, only the low income counts of children who reside in Title I served areas will be included in the calculation for ESSER. So they might give you 14 low income kids, but if only 10 of them are residing in a home building that's Title I served, then you're going to use the 10 number instead of the 14 number in that file.
Okay, Barb asks, if we only serve elementary Title I, do only non-public elementary qualify for ESSER?
Exactly, that's exactly right. So any low income counts that were reported by non-public schools outside of the elementary level, so the middle school or high school, you're not going to include those counts because you don't Title I serve those buildings.
Okay, Amy sounds like she's trying to check her understanding. She says, my understanding, if you spend federal money for a prior fiscal year expenditure, you will need to list that on your federal schedule for audit purposes.
I cannot answer that question.
You might want to email that one to us, Amy, and we can get it to the right people to make sure we give you a good answer, a thorough answer on that one. Okay, next. Sorry, from Karen. Sorry, need a clarification. We serve only elementary in Title I. When the guidance says low income count from Title I served attendance areas, does that mean non-public elementaries or non-public K-12? So this is similar to Barb's question.
Exactly. So when we're looking at the low income counts to include, we're only including those counts from Title I served attendance areas. So if your district only serves your elementary buildings and the elementary building is K-5, then for the non-public school, even if it's a K-12 non-public school, the only counts that will be included in the calculation are those that are reported to a K-5 building that does receive Title I.
Okay, and that is the difference between that original Method 1, Method 2 spreadsheet that we sent out and the new calculation. So I've seen some folks saying, hey, let's use that low income from the original one. That one counted all low income students, not just the ones from served buildings. So that's why the new calculation sheet needs to be used.
Right.
Mike asked, oh, go ahead.
I want to add something else to that. So everyone is focused on which non-public low income counts to use in the calculation. It's the same for the public district. So in that cell that says public district low income count, you can only include the low income counts from the Title I served buildings. So your district count will also be lower. So it's an altogether different proportion, and sometimes it results in a higher amount than it did previously, and sometimes it results in a lower amount. Like, you can't automatically assume, like Lisa did, that it's going to be the same as approach 1 on the initial spreadsheet from earlier this summer.
Yeah, and I think that the district piece has been a point of confusion for a lot of the districts I've talked to, so definitely be careful on that one. Mike Hearn says, I apologize for being a few minutes late. That's okay, Mike. May have missed this being answered, but wanted to know, is it appropriate to use our PPA amount from Title I to determine the non-public set-aside amount?
No. So you should be using the tool that was included in CCIP Note 448. There are very thorough instructions that go along with it, but if you need assistance, either your Office of Federal Programs Consultant or Lisa, Daphne, or I would be willing to walk you through that.
Karen asks, if under the new calculations, the amount set aside for the non-publics has been reduced, when would be an appropriate time to make a CCIP revision to the budget? Would we wait until we're able to upload the new spreadsheet? And do you have an idea when would that be?
So I know that the CCIP ESSER application page is being enhanced. Lisa, that enhancement hasn't already happened, has it?
I don't believe so, no. I have not seen that.
So I think the appropriate time for the CCIP note to come out with additional guidance is when the CCIP enhancement is actually live. So I know they're working on it. I don't know where it is in the release. I think at one point I heard later this month. Our releases are usually at the end of the month. So you would maybe expect to see a CCIP note then. When you do revise your ESSER funds, some districts are probably in a revision now. If the enhancement hasn't occurred, make a history log note. I mean, feel free to budget the new amount based on the new calculation. Put a history log note that says, this is what I did, so that it's documented for your consultant. If the amount is lower, under the section 1117 rules, but you have already expended the funds, obviously you're not going to be able to do a budget revision and reduce those funds since they've already been expended. And that's one of those situations where you would want to reach out to your consultant.
Okay, looks like Mary Jo's first question is basically that same question, when to make the changes. And then she asks, with the adjusted non-public amounts, will that affect the bottom line of the grant? In other words, will our total allocation be cut?
Perfect. So equitable services is always the second step of allocation. So with any grant, the amount that's awarded to the district is the amount that's awarded to the district. Equitable services is a proportion of that. So the total amount of funds that are flowing to a district is not going to change. What will change is the part that's marked for the non-public school.
Okay, Jennifer asks, will a deadline be set now for submitting the updated ESSER count and application? Similar, but a little different clarification needed there.
I'm not sure that there has been a date discussed. I think that the first step is going to be the CCIP enhancement needs to come out. And until we know the date that that's going to be released, we won't have a date when this is required. In terms of working with your non-public schools, we know that should be ongoing. So you should be continuing that conversation with them regardless or at the same time as the application issues or questions are coming up.
Okay, Cynthia asks, are the rules around how districts can spend their money also different? For instance, we formerly used approach 2 to spend district funds district-wide.
No, there's no there's been no modification to that. ESSER funds can be used in any public building, regardless of Title I service. The Title I model, section 117 rules are simply how the equitable services set aside is calculated. It was also how we initially allocated funds to districts. So the amount that the district received, low income played a factor in that. I don't know if I answered the question, Lisa. If I didn't, you can
I
circle
think
back.
so. I think it's, can we use it in our high schools, even though our high schools are not Title I served with this new approach? And the answer is yes, the district can still use those funds district-wide. I think they're all right with that. Next one, just to clarify, Ed Choice numbers do not count. They must use free and reduced numbers or Ohio household income count verification form.
No, that is not an accurate statement. So we know that through ongoing meaningful consultation with your non-public schools, that there may be a case of a non-public school who doesn't participate in Title I. Maybe they've never participated in Title I, so they don't collect that data. We're talking about a year ago, children who are enrolled in the non-public school a year ago. So if there is an Ed Choice scholarship child that was enrolled last year, then that child could be low income, right? So the district has to have a process where you are verifying that this Ed Choice child who was enrolled last year on a scholarship, who had their income verified by ODE's Office of Non-Public Education Options, there has to be a way for the non-public school to be able to show or provide documentation to the district that the child does fall within the same brackets that we see on the Ohio Household Income Verification Form or the National School Lunch Program. I can't say yes, count it, and I can't say no, don't count it, because I don't know the income level of that kid. There needs to be more consultation between the two parties.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is qualifying for Ed Choice does not necessarily mean you fit the income brackets for free and reduced lunch. It may not even mean you're low income, because a good proportion, probably 2/3 of the Ed Choice students, qualified based on their public school setting, not based on their income. So they may not even be a low income family at all. Okay, to confirm my October 2019 district low income count, where do I look?
So the district low income count comes from the current year's consolidated application building eligibility page.
Okay, and I got a note from Diane that sounds like maybe those ESSER changes have been put through. Diane, did you want to comment on that? Oh, we had you and we lost your microphone.
Lisa, they went in last week. They should see those changes on the budget details page, and then on the school allocation page, there will be changes.
Oh, excellent.
They're minor, but they're there. We do ask that they select the option they were using prior to the rescinding of the interim final rule.
Okay. Here's a really good question from Fairfield City. Just to clarify, are we sure that what is being said today is the final ruling?
I love it when I get asked questions like this. I mean, we know that the U.S. Department is not going to appeal. So we're as confident as we can be that this is the way we should be calculating services. I can't sit here and say that something may not change or something may change. I think this last 6 months have proved that I am in no position to say that.
None of us are. Okay, next one, and this seems to be a very common point of confusion. If Title I targeted school and don't serve all grade levels in our building, do we only include eligible non-public low-income students in the grade levels served in our targeted public building? So it sounds like maybe they're a K-5 building, but they only serve their K-3 kids?
Right. So that is confusing. That's a question we get a lot. All low-income counts from that building would be included. So if it's a K-5 building, targeted assistance, and the non-public school reports children in all grades K to 5, all of those counts would be included, even if the district is choosing to target those funds in first and second grade. It's still a Title I served building K-5, and the district has determined the need is in a specific grade level.
Okay, Kim asks, can ESSER funds still be spent on any building in the public district, or can ESSER funds only be spent on Title I served schools now?
ESSER funds can be expended in any of your public buildings, regardless of Title I service.
Okay, and Sherry asks, is it appropriate to budget and charge an admin fee to the non-publics as a percentage of the applications based on the amount spent?
Yes, so we know that an administrative cost and indirect costs are allowable out of the ESSER Equitable Services portion. That has not changed. That was in the initial guidance that came out. It's also in the section 1117 rules as well. You would just want to make sure that you have discussed that as part of your timely, meaningful, and ongoing consultation with your non-public schools.
I think that also then answers Chris Barrow's question, which is about indirect costs. So indirect cost and admin fees as appropriate can be applied. And that is our last question in chat. Definitely to circle back to what Diane said, there are changes already in ESSER, so it sounds like you can go ahead and start calculating and doing those revisions. There is a place to upload your spreadsheets once you've got that calculation in there. That'll be really helpful to your consultant. I have small districts, so I quite often just redo the math to make sure I'm making sense of things, but for those of you with large districts, that's a real challenge for your consultant to do that for all of them. But we have another question from Linda. What if a non-public school opted out of the federal funds and did not provide any data, but now wants to receive funding data? Is there any way for this school to receive ESSER funds?
Yes, so it goes back to the children that were enrolled during October of 2019 and identifying if any of those children would have been low income at that time and reside in a Title I served attendance area. If anyone needs the last year's Ohio Household Income Verification Form, feel free to shoot Lisa or I an email and we can give you a copy of that. The new fiscal year has been updated in NPDS. So we know the income brackets have changed. And we also know that if this is the case with your school, a district and school that you're working with, you need to have the low income data from October 2019. It can't be current income data.
Okay, Anne asks, where do we find the number of free and reduced we should be using on the spreadsheet? And I'm not sure if she means public or non-public, but we could probably, I guess, Chantel, you could hit on both.
Perfect. So I'm going to answer the question, but I'm also going to say there are very, very thorough instructions that were provided with the tool that literally walk you step by step. That's why the document, I think, is 7 pages long, because it's very, very detailed. But the public number comes from the building eligibility page. You will be looking at this current year's consolidated application building eligibility page, and you're only going to be including the low income counts from Title I served public buildings. For the non-public counts, you're going to start with the download data report that can be found in CCIP. The non-public school service page under Title I has a link that you click on, and it will generate an Excel file that is the interfacing of NPDS and CCIP. It will include every public building that the non-public schools have reported their children to, and whether or not that building is Title I served. I've had a lot of districts send me their file and say, hey, can you take a look at this? And what I'm seeing is that 90% of districts are not getting those two numbers right. So it's really important that you're using those two data sources as the place that you get your data from. Now, we know if non-public schools didn't report in NPDS, you may have additional data that you're including in your calculation. That is appropriate. We just want you to make sure that you understand the report is only giving you what was reported to us. So it's still part of your responsibility to make sure that you do have all of the low income data.
Thanks, Chantel. Michelle says, I missed the answer on the admin fee. Can it be repeated? So can you go over that administrative piece?
So administrative costs and indirect costs are both allowable under ESSER. They should be reasonable and necessary. It should be something that you have discussed in consultation with your non-public schools.
Thanks. We've had a couple recording. Yes, we will record this. We're recording this session. It'll be saved. It will be emailed out to the participants, and it will probably also be posted in the CCIP document library, and we'll give you links to find it there also. Next question from Kirsten. If a student was enrolled last year but not this year, does the non-public school have to show that they had expenditures related to COVID in the spring to be eligible for funding?
So that is a subject that you would want to engage in with your non-public school. We know that ESSER expenditures, like the question points out, were allowable back to March. So that seems to be the appropriate way to broach this question. So engage in consultation with your non-public school. And if you have questions specific to the situation, feel free to reach out to us.
Okay, Kevin says he joined a little late, but did you already answer questions about recovering funds already spent by a non-pub under the prior guidance that does not qualify under the latest guidance?
We did address that, basically leaning on CCIP Note 448. Right now, we do not expect districts to be going back and recovering funds. We are waiting on additional guidance from the U.S. Department. If you are a district that's in that situation, you have already expended your non-public service amount under the interim final rule, and there's no portion of funds left, you definitely want to shoot us an email so that we can keep that situation on our radar as new guidance will come out, hopefully, soon.
Okay, and Michelle asks, can Chantel repeat where to find the Title I kids in the CCIP and NPDS? Can you kind of go through that? I like to think of it as if you go into CCIP under Internet Explorer, you don't even have to go to NPDS to get it. So can you revamp those steps?
Yes, so first of all, Lisa is exactly right. Using Internet Explorer is the best way to get the document in an Excel file. So you're going to go into CCIP, your current year's application. You're going to go under Title I to the non-public school service page. That's where you see your list of in-district schools at the top, your out-of-district schools at the bottom. That's where you see the equitable service amounts that's generated in Title I. Well, right below the blue Save and Go To bar, or above your first in-district school, there is a little link there that says non-public. Oh, it says download data. That's what it says. You click that download data and it's going to give you a report that is the interfacing between NPDS and CCIP. It will have all of the data that non-public schools reported. It'll have the public buildings they reported to. It will have Title I service in the current year so that you can determine whether or not to include those or not. Have whether or not the non-public school was participating in Title I. It'll have that. It's a very nice report. Easiest to get from Internet Explorer. I would not recommend going into NPDS and trying to get this information. We designed the report a few years ago so that districts wouldn't have to leave CCIP to go look that stuff up. It's an easy place to get it.
That is our last question right now. Wait and see if we get some more in here.
I will just say again, that report only includes the data that non-public schools reported in NPDS. If you collected and verified any data outside of NPDS earlier in the summer as we directed, you will have to manually include that when you fill out those boxes in the new tool.
Okay, and Kelly says, but wouldn't we print last year's, or we should be in this year's CCIP application?
It's this year's CCIP application, because this year's application, equitable service counts came from last year. So October 2019 count week happened in October. Non-public school principals reported those counts in February to May. When the consolidated application came out in June, it's going to use those 19 counts for Title I. So going into this current year's application is the correct place to find your counts for ESSER equitable services.
Another question about where and when will this recording be posted?
I mean, it usually takes a couple days for communications to work their magic and make it into a YouTube video. We've been posting things in the ESSER folder, is where most of the recordings have been placed. And like Lisa said, everyone on the call is going to get the link to the recording once it's posted. So that's probably the easiest place to find it.
Sandra asks, if we only serve free universal feed in the public buildings, we only include free counts from the non-public. Is this correct?
That is exactly correct. So if you are a community eligibility provision school and you have indicated that you're using only the free price lunch students, that's what you will include for the non-public school. The instructions that came out have a whole section specific to community eligibility provision low income counts. Again, if you have questions about that district specific, reach out to your consultant or Lisa, Daphne, or I, and we can help you with that.
And when you print that report, the download data of the non-public file, there is a column for their reported free lunch. There's a column for their reported reduced price lunch from the non-publics. So once you exclude the kids from non-served buildings, it's really easy to get those numbers. You're welcome. Okay, Christina says, for clarification, if we have students not currently enrolled in non-public but counted in October of 2019, and the non-pub did not purchase PPE until fall of 2020, would public district count the students no longer enrolled? I think our initial question about this was for no students being left at the non-public from a particular district. It sounds like this might be less students or just a change of counts.
I would say this is one that we would want in an email, just to make sure that we have considered all of the factors.
You can email it, Christina, to your consultant directly, or you can send it to Chantel and she will delve into it with you. I appreciate all these great questions. I'm sure Chantel does also. We'll stick along here until we hear from any more of you that have questions. Certainly don't hesitate. Oh, how do we know who our consultant is, Chantel?
Oh, that's a good question. So when you're in the consolidated application in CCIP, along the left menu, you see funding, you see planning. One of the things that you see is address. If you click on address book, all of your contacts will be listed there. So not only for our office, but IDEA, grants management, they're all listed there with our email addresses. So it should be easy for you to find. If you it out, you can shoot one of the presenters on this call an email and we will figure it out for you.
Anne wants to know if if they can print out the slides. I think if we send the recorded format, maybe not, but we can certainly talk with our office about getting you a handout version of the slides that would be printable.
Yeah, I think that was my bad. I think in earlier trainings that we had this summer, I gave a copy to our office admin and she provided that to you in advance. I didn't do that. And when I got the confirmation email, I realized that the questions weren't, or the slides weren't attached. So I'll make sure that Candace gets that to include in the follow-up email. Seems like we might be good, Lisa, in terms of any additional questions.
Yeah, I am not seeing any. I'm seeing lots of thank yous, and we thank you for all coming to this, and hopefully you got valuable information. Candace, I think if you want to stop the recording, we can do that at this point. And we'll, again, stick on the call here for a little while, just in case anyone's still on and has a last minute question. We're happy to stay for a few more minutes and help out.